Who makes a deal with an insolvent money pit state-owned entity that doesn't have the support of its finance minister? Phakamile Hlubi-Majola is NUMSA spokesperson, as well as one of the negotiators from last week's stalemate. She's joining us via Skype, as well as Aviation Economist Joachim Vermooten. I'll start with you, Phakamile. Why did you make a deal with an insolvent SOE? How do you know that your deal is worth the paper that it was agreed on?
For us, this was two issues. One was there's a matter of principle here, which the South African Airways management, like it or not, they have to adhere to. They made a deal with pilots to increase their salaries by 5.9%. This was for 600 members of the workforce. That increase of 5.9% for a pilot who's already earning 100,000 rands per month average cost the airline over 100 million. And they found the money for that. So we do not think that it is unreasonable for the rest of the workers and the workforce to demand its deserved increase. Every April, SAA engages in wage talks with unions and arrives at a point where increases are granted. So I think that question is best directed to the airline. They committed to us and they've committed to the pilots for this increase, and our members are expecting
Phakamile,
it.
I have to ask you this. You're the one who made the deal with the airline, knowing its financial predicament. This is why I'm asking the question. How do you know you're going to get it? I essentially said in the intro that the airline does not enjoy the support of its finance minister, who again last week was calling for its closure. So how do you know you're going to get the money? I mean, do we even have the 2 billion that the SAA said that it was going to secure as working capital to pay those November and December salaries as well?
Well, this was the assurance that was given to us by government, the shareholder, that the 2 billion operating capital would be paid on Friday. That was the assurance that we were given, and we were acting on that assurance. And even in the wage negotiations, the management and the board, because they were mandated by the shareholder, said that there were additional payments which were coming in January, and subject to those payments, the 5.9% would be added as an increase for workers. But we've always made it very clear to our members that if that money is not forthcoming, our problems are far more than a 5.9% wage increase. It means that there's no money to operate the airline. And this is something that we are alive to, we're aware of, but the situation that we find ourselves in, we can only go according to the promises that have been given to us by the executive management and the board in the discussions that we held last week.
Joachim, let me bring you in here. You know all things aviation. You've seen this struggling national carrier ask for bailout after bailout. Last I checked, during Vuyani Jahana's years, they needed 21.7 billion for a turnaround plan. Here we are nearly 3 years into that plan. There is no turnaround. Can this cranky old machine ever be turned around? Is it worth turning around?
The basic issue is whether there's a will to actually turn it around and make it profitable and provide the funding for that. Up to very recent, there was a so-called dual mandate, and that is the cause for where we're sitting today. So it is possible to make suitable adjustments to the airline. It has been restructured successfully from 2007 to about 2009. But unfortunately, after that, its scale of operation was geared up significantly, and the market didn't rise to that same level of activity. And that's where we are today. So some action has been taken to reduce the scale of operations, but that unfortunately requires cuts of all costs, including staff and headcounts, unfortunately.
Joachim, Phakamile speaks about the fact that the airline found money for pilots and their increase. But the airline is arguing that those are essential services, essentially saying that NUMSA members and SACA members are not as essential. Are the unions punching above their weight here? I mean, are they going to get what they're looking for? Didn't they just essentially kick the retrenchment can down the road, as it were?
Well, in an airline, you can't only operate with pilots. You need a lot of supporting staff. You need cabin crew and technical operations. And without their commitments and to good service levels, the airline can't function. So it's not a question that you can live without any of the members of the unions. It needs to have a collective approach to it. I believe that on the pilot side, they have already reduced the number of pilots by about 16%. But that is the next round of negotiations, the actual restructuring of the number of headcounts. So just coming to this is a normal type of negotiation between organised labour and the management of a company, as you would have in any other company, any industry, and if the parties can't see eye to eye, it's open for the trade unions or organised labour to basically take the actions that resolved in strikes. So one should see the strikes as a method of resolving some industrial disputes. So that is a normal type of business type of activity.
Phakamile, I'm going to come to you. Let's move the story forward as we stand. Even though we have a wage agreement with numerous unions, including yourself, SACA, as well as NTM, among others, Solidarity is still pushing through with its business rescue application. Is this a real threat? Could SAA be put under business rescue? And where does NUMSA stand with regards to that application?
Well, business rescue for us is deeply concerning, because it does have very, very serious implications, especially for employment for our members. And in the past, our experience with business rescue has been that workers have really suffered at the end of that process. We have left it up to our attorneys to give us a very detailed brief in terms of what our position should be in relation to this application. If you read Solidarity's remarks on this issue, they have said that they took this course of action to prevent government, the shareholder, from liquidating the airline. So in that respect, you can see why they would have taken that course of action, because you had board members like Martin Kingston, who a couple of days before the strike occurred were hinting at the fact that they were planning to liquidate South African Airways. You had the finance minister recklessly making comments at an investment conference that the airline should be dumped, that it should just be sold, and that even his friend Sim Shabalala can purchase the airline. His statements were reckless and irresponsible, particularly in an environment where our economy is not growing. We have 38.5% unemployment. This government is not creating jobs. Every minister should be doing their damnedest to protect the few jobs that we have. And then you have the finance minister making outrageous comments about a state-owned entity that he has a responsibility to take care of.
Joachim, I'm going to bring you in here as the Economist. You hear the same kind of phrases. You wonder if the jig is not up. Essentially, more than one interested entity and a big stakeholder here has said that there is no reasonable prospect that the airline will turn its financial fortunes around and grow and make a profit soon. Are we just living on borrowed time here? Is the airline without any other prospect? Will it have to be shut down and started all over again, as Finance Minister has suggested?
Well, there's a number of issues in this regard. SAA, for some reason, has not been successful in their turnaround strategies, whether that's the actual strategy since 2012 or whether it's only the implementation of that strategy. Normally, you have to implement a turnaround within 2 years, say 18 months in that type of vicinity. so that you can have a clear focus and actually achieve what's called wins or small wins over the short time, a very short time frame. Therefore, I don't believe in a long-term turnaround strategy because, as other economists has already said, in the long run we're all dead, and then it's irrelevant. So one needs to actually tackle something and get it done, and then refocus on how to grow the business thereafter. So that's where we are at the moment. The airline operates at about a loss of 6 billion a year, and that's not sustainable. The government just don't have the ability to fund that type of loss. So.
Phakamile? Oh, sorry there, Joachim. Time is never a friend on this show. Phakamile, I want to close off with you in 30 seconds. What happens if the deal is not adhered to? Do you go back out on the street and embark on strike action?
Well, for us, one of the things we secured in the deal was something that we called a training layoff scheme. And the purpose of that scheme is to actually give relief to South African Airways. For those 900 or so workers, which they say are a burden on its finances, if those workers participate in the training layoff scheme, which is supported by the SETAs and the Department of Labor, it means that it only pays 25% of their salaries. So the 75% of the wage bill is taken care of by someone else. We argue that this is a very, very progressive measure in taking steps to actually give the airline breathing space in order that it can find other alternatives which don't involve retrenchments and the further losses of jobs.
I'd like to thank both my guests, NUMSA National Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, as well as Aviation Economist Joachim Vermooten.